You know that specific kind of silence that happens right before a storm hits? That heavy, suffocating pressure where the air feels like it's made of lead? That is exactly what the Cook County Courthouse felt like that Tuesday morning. I want you to picture this. On one side of the room, you have the sharks. There's Silas Sterling, tech billionaire, philanthropist, the kind of guy whose face is on the cover of Forbes every other month. He's wearing a suit that costs more than my entire college education, sitting there with this relaxed, bored smirk, like he's waiting for a table at a Michelin star restaurant, not fighting for custody of his unborn child. And right next to him, gripping his arm like a designer accessory, is Chloe. She's the mistress, but she doesn't act like one. She acts like the queen. She's younger, sharper, dressed in white, which was a bold choice. Let me tell you, and she's looking around the courtroom with a sneer, like the very oxygen in the room isn't good enough for her lungs. And then, on the other side, there's Elena. Elena Vance is 29, 7 months pregnant, and she looks like she's trying to disappear into her chair. She's wearing this simple, pale blue maternity dress. Her hands are shaking, and she keeps rubbing her belly over and over, like she's trying to shield the baby from the bad vibes in the room. She's got a public defender who looks overworked and tired, and honestly, it looked like a slaughter waiting to happen. Sitting high up on the bench, watching all of this, is Judge Arthur Pendergast. Now, Arthur is a legend in Chicago. Silver hair, stern face, the kind of judge who doesn't tolerate nonsense. He's seen it all. But that morning, something was off. He kept looking at Elena. He'd adjust his glasses, look at the files, and then his eyes would drift back to her face. He couldn't place it, but there was something about the curve of her jaw, the way her eyes looked when she was scared. It triggered a memory in him, something buried deep under 30 years of case law and regret. The hearing starts, and it's brutal. Silas's lawyers go on the attack immediately. They paint Elena as unstable, hysterical, a gold digger who trapped the poor billionaire with a pregnancy. They're tearing her apart, word by word. But Elena, she stands up. She's trembling, but she stands. She starts talking about the nights Silas locked her out of their accounts, the tracking devices on her car, the way he'd smile while he told her she was worthless. And that's when Chloe snapped. See, people like Chloe, they can't handle not being the center of the universe. She couldn't stand seeing the room listen to Elena. She whispers something to Silas. He ignores her, and she just loses it. It happens so fast, but for everyone in that room, it felt like slow motion. Chloe stands up, screaming, "She's a liar. It's all a lie." Judge Pendergast slams his gavel, shouting for order. But Chloe doesn't stop. She lunges. She bypasses the bailiff, steps into the aisle, and before anyone can process what's happening, she kicks, a full-force, vicious kick right into Elena's stomach. The sound, God, the sound was sickening. It was a dull thud, followed instantly by Elena's scream, a sound of pure, primal terror. She crumpled to the floor, curling around her belly, gasping for air. The courtroom exploded. Lawyers were scrambling. Reporters were shouting. Security was tackling Chloe, who was still screaming obscenities. But Judge Pendergast, he froze, just for a second. He watched Elena fall, and he saw a silver locket slip out from her dress and hit the floor, a silver locket shaped like a teardrop. Arthur felt the blood drain from his face. He knew that locket. He bought it in a pawn shop in 1994. He gave it to the only woman he ever truly loved, the woman who vanished from his life without a trace. "Call the paramedics," Arthur roared, his voice cracking, losing all its judicial composure. Now, he practically jumped off the bench, rushing down to where Elena was lying. He wasn't a judge anymore. He was just a terrified man kneeling beside a terrified woman. He saw the pain in her eyes, the way she was whispering, my baby," over and over again. And he felt a protective rage so hot it almost blinded him. They loaded her onto the stretcher, and as they wheeled her out, Arthur saw Silas. The billionaire wasn't horrified. He wasn't scared. He looked annoyed, like this was an inconvenience to his schedule. He was brushing lint off his jacket where Chloe had grabbed him. That look sealed his fate. Arthur didn't know it yet, but the war had just begun. Let's cut to the hospital. It's midnight. The rain is hammering against the windows of Northwestern Memorial, turning the city lights into blurry streaks. Elena is in a bed, hooked up to monitors. The baby is alive, thank God, but the doctors are worried. There's trauma, there's stress, the heart rate is erratic. Elena is lying there, staring at the ceiling, feeling more alone than she ever has in her life. Her phone buzzes. It's a text from Silas. Don't you dare talk to the press. You sign the NDA, you take the settlement, or I will bury you. I have lawyers who can keep that kid in court until she's 18. Be smart, Elena. She starts to cry, silent tears that burn her cheeks. She's got nothing, no money, no family. Her mom died 2 years ago, and she's up against a man who owns half the city. Then there's a knock at the door. She wipes her eyes, expecting a nurse, but it's him, the judge, Arthur Pendergast. He's not wearing his robes now. He's in a wrinkled suit, looking older, tired, and holding a paper coffee cup like it's the only thing keeping him upright. I shouldn't be here, he says, his voice rough. It's highly unethical. But I couldn't go home. Did you come to tell me I lost? Elena asks, her voice barely a whisper. Did Silas win already? No, Arthur says. He walks closer, his eyes locked on her face. I came to ask you about your necklace. Elena's hand goes to her throat. The silver teardrop. It was my mother's, Sarah. She died a few years back. Arthur nods, and he looks like he's about to break apart. He pulls a wallet out of his pocket, opens it, and takes out a photo. It's old, frayed at the edges. It shows a young Arthur, looking happy and carefree, with his arm around a beautiful woman with laughing eyes. It was Sarah. I loved her. Arthur whispers, we were young. My family, they were wealthy, snobs. Really, they didn't think she was good enough. They pressured us, made life hell. One day, she just left a note saying I'd be better off without her. She never told me she was taking a part of me with her. He looks at Elena, tears standing in his eyes. I did the math, Elena. Your age when she left, that locket. Elena is staring at him, her world tilting on its axis. You think, I don't think, Arthur says. I feel it. I look at you, and I see her. I see Sarah. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a DNA test kit. I know this is crazy. I know you have a million other things to worry about right now. But if I'm right, if I'm your father, then you are not fighting this alone. You have never been alone. You just didn't know I was there. They did the test. It was a rapid one, the kind you pay extra for when you need answers yesterday. While they waited, the world outside was burning. Silas's PR machine was in full swing. They released an edited video of the courtroom incident. In their version, the camera angle changes right before the kick. It looks like Elena lunged at Chloe. It looks like Chloe was defending herself. The headlines were brutal. Pregnant gold digger attacks fiancé. Billionaire victim of unstable ex. Elena saw it on the hospital TV. She felt like screaming, but she didn't have the breath. But then the results came back. 99.99%. Arthur Pendergast sat on the edge of her hospital bed, held her hand, and wept. For 30 years, he'd been a man of the law, a man of rules, a man who thought he'd lost his chance at a family. And here she was, battered, bruised. But here, I have to recuse myself, Arthur said, wiping his eyes, his voice turning into steel. I can't be the judge on your case anymore. It's a conflict of interest. Elena panicked. But if you leave, who will protect me? Next was Marcus Cole, former FBI, specialized in forensic accounting. He was the guy who brought down the mob in the 90s by following the paper trail. If Silas had hidden a penny illegally, Marcus would find it. And finally, Detective Miller, a grizzled homicide detective who had worked a cold case 5 years ago. The death of Silas's first wife. It was ruled a boating accident, but Miller never bought it. He'd been waiting for a reason to reopen that file. They met in Elena's hospital room. It was like a war council. Here's the situation, Arthur said, pacing the room. Silas thinks he's won the media war. He thinks Elena is just a broke, scared girl with no resources. He thinks I'm just a judge who's going to assign a new docket and move on. We are going to let him believe that. Veronica smiled, and it was terrifying. We let him get comfortable. We let him think he's untouchable, and then we hit him with everything. Marcus opened his laptop. I've already started digging into his offshore shells, the Cayman accounts. There's a pattern of transfers every time a problem disappears in his life. Payoffs. Silence money. Detective Miller leaned against the wall, arms crossed. And I found the witness from the first wife's case, the deckhand who was on the boat. He was paid to disappear to Mexico. I found him. He's broke. He's sick. And he wants to clear his conscience before he dies. Elena listened to them, looking from one face to another. For months, she had felt small. She had felt like prey. But watching her father command this room, watching these strangers sharpen their knives for her sake, she felt something new. She felt dangerous. There's a gala, Elena said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. On Friday, the Sterling Foundation Charity Ball. He's receiving the Humanitarian of the Year award. Everyone will be there. The press, the mayor, his investors. Arthur stopped pacing. He looked at his daughter. Friday, that's in 3 days. You're not cleared to leave. I don't care, Elena said. She sat up, wincing at the pain in her ribs, but her eyes were blazing. He humiliated me in public. He lied about me to the world. I want to look him in the eye when his life falls apart. I want to be there. Veronica nodded slowly. It's risky, but it's poetic. If we do this, we do it live. No press releases. We hijack his moment. Can we get in? Marcus asked. Arthur pulled a platinum invitation out of his pocket. I was invited. Before the incident, I'm a respected member of the judiciary, after all. He smirked. I think I'll bring a +1 or 4. The plan was set. It was insane. It was dangerous. Silas Sterling was a man with private security that rivaled the Secret Service. If this went wrong, if the tech failed, if the evidence wasn't solid, Silas would sue them into oblivion and bury the truth forever. But they had the one thing Silas didn't account for. They had the rage of a father who just found his child. Friday night arrived. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel was dripping in crystals and gold. It was a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. Silas stood at the podium, looking like a golden god, accepting his award. Chloe was by his side, clapping, playing the doting partner. The picture of innocence. Thank you, Silas said, his voice smooth as silk, echoing through the speakers. I have always believed that true power comes from protecting the vulnerable, from standing up for those who cannot stand for themselves. The irony was thick enough to choke on. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Backstage, in the shadows, Arthur pushed Elena's wheelchair. She was wearing a black dress that hid her bandages, her face pale but fierce. Veronica, Marcus, and Detective Miller were flanking them. Are you ready? Arthur whispered, squeezing her shoulder. Let's end him, Elena said. Marcus tapped into the venue's AV system. I'm in. Signal is live. Taking control in 3, 2, 1. On the massive screens behind Silas, the humanitarian logo flickered. It distorted. And then, the image changed. It wasn't a charity video. It was the raw, unedited security footage from the courtroom. The crowd gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. On screen, giant and undeniable, was Chloe screaming, lunging, and kicking a pregnant woman. The sound of the impact boomed through the ballroom speakers. Silas froze. He turned around. Seeing the screen, his face going pale. Cut the feed. He screamed, cut it now. But Marcus had locked the system. Then the video changed. It showed bank transfers, millions of dollars labeled hush money, emails from Silas to a private investigator ordering the harassment of his first wife, photos of bruises. What is this? Chloe shrieked, grabbing Silas's arm. Fix it. Then the audio played. It was the voice of the deckhand, clear and gravelly. He pushed her. I saw him. He pushed her over the rail and told me if I said a word, he'd kill my family. The ballroom was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. The champagne glasses stopped, clinking. The wealthy elite of Chicago were staring at the stage in horror. And that's when Arthur pushed the wheelchair out from the shadows. He rolled Elena right onto the stage, into the blinding spotlight. The crowd parted. Silas looked at them, his eyes wide with shock and fury. You, Silas hissed. You can't be here. Arthur stepped in front of Elena. He stood tall, his voice projecting without a microphone. The boom of a man who has commanded courtrooms for 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Arthur announced, I apologize for the interruption, but I believe there's been a mistake with the award. You see, a humanitarian protects life. This man destroys it. He pointed a finger at Silas Sterling. You are an abuser, a fraud, and a murderer. Security, Silas yelled, panicking now. Get them off the stage. But security didn't move, because walking up the center aisle, flashing their badges, were 10 federal agents. Led by Detective Miller, Silas Sterling, Miller shouted, You are under arrest for the murder of Elizabeth Sterling, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit assault. Silas tried to run. He actually tried to bolt for the side exit, but he tripped, maybe accidentally, maybe because a waiter stuck his foot out and fell hard. The agents were on him in seconds. Cuffs clicked. Chloe tried to sneak away, blending into the crowd, but Veronica Sharp was waiting for her. Going somewhere, Cinderella? She asked, blocking her path as 2 officers grabbed her arms. You're an accessory to assault, and we have the receipt for the shoes. As they dragged Silas away, he screamed, kicking and thrashing, looking at Elena with pure hatred. You're nothing. I'll buy my way out of this. You're nobody. Elena looked at him. She stood up from the wheelchair, wincing, but standing. On her own defeat, she took the microphone. I'm not nobody, she said, her voice ringing out to the stunned room. I'm the woman who survived you. And this, she grabbed Arthur's hand, this is my father. The applause started slowly, one person, then another, then the whole room. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar of justice finally being served. You know, they say revenge is a dish best served cold. But watching Silas Sterling get dragged out of his own gala in handcuffs, screaming like a toddler while the flashbulbs went off, that felt pretty warm. It felt like the sun coming out after a long, dark winter. But the real story? The real story wasn't the arrest. That's just the headline. The real story is what happens when the adrenaline fades and you have to rebuild a life. From the wreckage, the days following the gala were a blur of media frenzy. Every news outlet in the country wanted an interview with the mystery daughter and the hero judge. But Arthur shut them all down. He put a cordon of privacy around Elena so tight that not even a fruit fly could get through without a subpoena. He moved her into his home, a sprawling, old Victorian in the suburbs that smelled like cedar and old books. It was a house that had been too quiet for too long, filled with empty rooms where a family should have been. I kept a room for you, Arthur told her the first night, showing her a bedroom painted a soft yellow. I mean, not for you, specifically, because I didn't know, but I always hoped. I kept it ready. Elena looked at the room, at the dust motes dancing in the sunlight, and for the first time in 7 months, she exhaled. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was safe, but the fight wasn't over for the legal team. Veronica Sharp was a beast in the courtroom. Silas tried everything. He hired a dream team of lawyers, tried to get bail, tried to claim the video was a deepfake. But Marcus Cole had done his homework. The forensic trail was undeniable. The trial of Silas Sterling became the trial of the century. And the star witness wasn't just the deckhand or the financial records. It was Chloe C. Once the handcuffs went on, loyalty went out the window. Chloe wasn't built for prison. She cut a deal faster than she used to cut lines at a club. She testified against Silas. She told the jury everything, the abuse she witnessed, the plans he made to discredit Elena, the way he laughed about paying off the cops in the first investigation. She painted a picture of a monster so vivid that even his own lawyers looked sick. Silas got 45 years, no parole. The judge, a colleague of Arthur's who respected him immensely, threw the book at him. And then through the library too. Chloe got 5 years for assault and obstruction, which, considering she kicked a pregnant woman, felt light to Elena, but Veronica assured her it was enough to ruin her life. And then, 3 weeks after the verdict, it happened. It was 3 a.m. The house was quiet. Elena woke up with a sharp pain that was very different from the ache of the injury. It was a tightening, A pressure. She waddled down the hall to Arthur's room and knocked. "Dad." He opened the door instantly, awake in a second. "What is it? Are you okay?" "I think," Elena grimaced, gripping the doorframe. "I think your granddaughter is impatient." The drive to the hospital was the opposite of the ride in the ambulance months ago. It was calm. Arthur drove carefully, talking to her, telling her bad dad jokes to distract her from the contractions. "Why did the scarecrow win an award?" he asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Why?" Elena gritted out. "Because he was outstanding in his field." Elena laughed and then groaned. "That was terrible. I have 1,000,000 of them," Arthur promised. "I've been saving them up for 30 years. Grace Laura Pendergast Vance was born at 6:40 a.m. as the sun was rising over Lake Michigan. She was small, a little early, but she was a fighter. She had a full head of dark hair and lungs that let the whole ward know she had arrived. When the nurse handed her to Elena, the world stopped. All the pain, the fear, the trauma of the last year just evaporated. It didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered but this tiny, warm weight in her arms. Arthur was standing by the window, giving them space, looking terrified to intrude. "Dad," Elena said softly. "Come meet her." Arthur walked over. He looked at the baby, and then he looked at Elena, and the tears just rolled down his face. Unashamed, he reached out a finger, and Grace's tiny hand curled around it, gripping tight. "Hello, Grace," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm your grandpa. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you." He looked at Elena. "She looks like Sarah. Around the eyes, she looks like you, too," Elena said. "She has your stubborn chin." Arthur laughed, a wet, happy sound. "God help us then." Life after that settled into a beautiful, chaotic rhythm. Elena didn't have to worry about money. Silas's assets were frozen, and a massive settlement was paid out to his victims, leaving Elena and Grace set for life. But she didn't just sit on the cash. She started a foundation, the Grace Initiative. It provided legal aid and safe housing for women trapped in high-conflict abusive relationships, women who were up against powerful men and felt like they had no voice. Veronica Sharp came on board as the head of legal counsel. They became a nightmare for every abusive millionaire in the Midwest. And Arthur retired. He hung up his robes for good. He said he had a more important job now. He became a full-time grandpa. If you walk by the park in their neighborhood on a Tuesday afternoon, you'll see them. An older man with silver hair pushing a stroller, talking to the baby like she's a jury. "Now, Grace," he'll say. The squirrel has a reasonable expectation of gathering nuts, but the pigeon is clearly encroaching on his jurisdiction, and Elena walks beside them. No longer the scared woman in the blue dress. She walks with her head high, wearing the silver locket around her neck. One evening, about a year later, Elena sat on the porch swing with Arthur. Grace was asleep in his lap. The sun was setting, painting the sky in purples and oranges. "You saved me," Elena said quietly, breaking the silence. "You know that, right? You didn't just win the case. You saved my life." Arthur rocked the swing gently. "No, Elle, you saved yourself. You stood up in that courtroom. You faced him. I just even the odds." He looked down at Grace. "I spent 30 years regretting the past, regretting that I let your mother go, regretting that I didn't fight harder for us. I thought my life was just going to be work, case files, and empty rooms." He looked at Elena. "You gave me a second act. You gave me a reason to be more than just your honor. You made me dad, and that is a title I will defend with my life." Elena rested her head on his shoulder. "I'm writing a book," she said. "Oh, yeah, about Mom, about us, about what happens when you refuse to let the bad guys win." What are you going to call it?" Elena smiled, touching the locket. "The Justice of Grace." "I like it," Arthur said. "It sounds definitive." They sat there as the stars came out. 3 generations of a family that was almost destroyed, but instead forged something stronger in the fire. And that's the thing about justice. Sometimes it looks like a gavel banging in a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like handcuffs on a villain. But the best kind of justice, the kind that really lasts, it looks like a baby sleeping safely in her grandfather's arms. It looks like a mother who no longer flinches when a door slams. It looks like a home filled with terrible dad jokes and unconditional love. Silas Sterling sits in a cell today, probably still wondering how he lost to a nobody. He never understood that power isn't about money or influence. Power is about having something worth fighting for. He had an ego. They had a family, and in the end, family always wins. So, if you're out there, fighting a battle that feels too big, feeling like the odds are stacked against you, don't give up. You never know who's waiting in the wings to stand by your side. You never know when the tide will turn. Speak your truth. Stand your ground. And remember, you are never as alone as you think you are. I'm curious, have you ever had a moment where someone stepped in and changed the course of your life? Someone who stood up for you when you couldn't? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that justice is real, hit that like button and share it. Let's remind the world that the good guys still win sometimes. Until next time, stay strong, stay safe, and keep fighting. This is the story of the judge, the daughter, and the verdict that changed everything.